years were you there? I mean, you guys didn't overlap at all, and that's surprising.
I don't know.
No, we didn't overlap in the dance classes.
Right. What years were you there?
I'm trying to think. I think it was in high school because I had to take the bus to get there, and this was Hollywood, and I remember taking the bus and seeing these old women on the bus that had all of this makeup that looked like maybe they had been extras in movies or something.
Hollywood bug.
Yeah, just very interesting experience coming from the Black community, to Hollywood. And let's see what else.
You said coming from the Black community, and where exactly were you living?
We lived on 65th and Vermont, between Vermont and Normandy. We lived around Normandy. What's that question? Is that Adams? No, is that Adams? Yeah, Normandy and Adams. Yeah, all in that little area there.
And for 1 year.
Yeah.
And Horton was in Hollywood, right? Where was it in Hollywood?
Yeah, Hollywood, Melrose. Yeah, and then
Melrose in La Cienega,
somewhere in that area.
Yeah.
And then I also went to. I also took dance at a community school, a community center on Jefferson, and I don't, it might have been close to Dorsey. So then, when I was in elementary school, I made a little dog, and my teacher was so excited about this dog that they had a assembly, and they had 4 of us up there, I don't know, somebody was reciting poetry and so on and so on, and I had to talk about this dog that I had created out of clay, so that was my first experience talking about my work
in elementary
school. And then I went to Pasadena Junior College because they had an excellent art program, and I was very excited about going there. However, I guess racism raised its ugly head.
How did you know that you wanted to be an artist?
I don't know. I honestly, when you were talking, I was trying to figure out where did these interests come from. I really don't know. My mother there was no one in my family that was an artist. I had an uncle that gave me my first coloring set, and the closest he got to art was he had, those paintings that have the dogs playing cards. That's what he loved those. So that was my first experience with a painting, was these dogs playing cards. So I really don't know. I know now that part of who I am came from my mother, because even though she wasn't artistic in certain ways, she loved presenting, being the hostess, and she would change, even though we all had, we had a very modest income always, she would change the entire house every 3 or 4 years, change the upholstery, change the carpet, change the draperies, everything. And she just loved to present. I mean, that's all you can say, present. If money was rough, she would, make beans and rice, but she would serve them in silver and cut glass and champagne. She always served champagne, so it was always about that. And even the places she worked, she worked at Dorothy something in Bullocks, Wilshire, and it was all glass, and she just loved, the finer things. Anyway, so I think that's this issue of installation and so on, that, she created a total environment when people would come in.
And aesthetics too.
Yes,
I mean,
oh,
it's
yeah.
her aesthetic presentation.
Oh, absolutely. So then I went, okay, so I was in PPCC. Everybody black, they knew did not, you know, you had to be a resident. And so again, we found people, you know, whose addresses we could use. Well, they would investigate you. And if you weren't, you know, if that wasn't really your address, then they'd kick you out. So I only spent one semester in PPCC. I really wanted to stay there instead of going to UCCS. Cal State LA. And so I had to transfer to Cal State LA. And while I was there, you know, I had to decide art or dance. And clearly, even if I was the best dancer in the world, I knew that that was a limited experience, that you could only be a professional for so long. So art, I knew I could do until, you know, I was 108. So that's why I chose art as a major and dance as a minor. And while I was there, in the summer probably, there were dance things like at UCLA and Bennington. And my dance teacher there was Murray Lewis, who was from New York. And Murray Lewis collaborated always with Alan Nicolai. And I don't know if you're familiar with Alan Nicolai, are you? And so Alan Nicolai, besides being a musician, always incorporated the arts in his presentation. So I had that experience, even though Alan Nicolai didn't come that often. Murray Lewis, you know, was his collaborator and quite a taskmaster. So when I was at Cal State, I got a job at Pasadena Art Museum as an assistant teacher, and at Watts Towers Art Center as, you know, a teacher. And those were totally pivotal experiences for me, because there was such rigorous energy in both places. And Pasadena Art Museum was the most amazing place, and if they haven't, they should really write a history of Pasadena Art Museum. Were you guys familiar with it at all? No.
A little bit from the histories.
Okay,
Yeah.
because it was totally experimental. Totally. It started out in a small building that was very Asian. It was Asian architecture, and they had the blue four in there. They had original blue fours in there, Paul Clegg and Jim Dine, you name it. Keen Holtz, all these people, you know, had their work there. They were like the big people, and so they would have these incredible happenings, and, you know, dance and music and painting and everything, and you take the kids through the gallery and they would dance in front of the canvases. So it was just rigorous and exciting, but it was equally exciting in Watts, because at that point, you know, that was before they had Watts Towers Art Center, and the Watts Tower Center, I guess you might call it, was what they called the White House, because it was just a little house, and the art classes would happen in this little tiny house, and then we would go to kind of the burned out area of the actual Watts Towers and play in there and so on. So, and then Noah Purefoy was there, Judson Powell was there, and Noah was just amazing. I mean, he was just out there. And he was just as out there as the people in Pasadena, but it was two different things, you know. So I was really lucky in being able to, you know, balance these two worlds and being influenced by these two worlds.
Can you just say a little bit about your graduate school, and then we'll stop and go on to Ulysses and
Okay.
pick up a little bit more.
Okay. Well, I went to, I got my BA in '66, and then I went immediately to Japan for a year. And part of that was because, and I don't know why, I think I love dance so much, but I knew that I could not be in a dance world because besides, the body thing, besides the skill, technical thing, I was always dancing differently than other people. So they kept saying, well, you have to be in the group. You know? I could never quite accomplish that. But there was such a joy of movement. So I remember getting this book on Japanese contemporary art, and I wasn't impressed with the paintings as much because it just seemed like a copy of what was happening in America. But when I saw the Gutai group, I said, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what I want. This is what I'm thinking. And that was my reason for going to Japan. I really wanted to find them, which I never did. But I was totally influenced by their work. And I was totally influenced by this issue of everything working together, the Gestalt kind of thing. And I just, and then in Watts, it was the poets. Yeah, was that during right after the riot? Yeah.
Watts
Kamau.
Riot's
Yeah, Watch, and Kamau and people like that. Yeah, all of these, that was happening in Watts as well. Everybody was coming together to, try and make something out of the rubble that had happened. And everybody was doing it in a collaborative sense as well as, separately looking at our art differently and seeing how, it can expand beyond the European concepts and modes.
So let's just start up with that next
Okay.
time. So we expand it to Watts. We can ask you a little bit more about Japan, which I
Okay.
don't know.
Yeah.
But we're going to start with Ulysses while Judith is out of the room. And please begin.
Okay. It's kind of interesting listening to all of you guys' histories, because we all have similar kind of histories in different points of intersection. I was born in Los Angeles in 1946, which at the time, even today, I mean, it has been called South Central LA. Now they just call it Central LA. Everybody got a new name for the place where black folks live. But for the most part, as Maren mentioned when I was born in Hoover General, I don't know if that even exists now. It's around 60-something in Hoover or late, like that, about that way. And of course, my family sort of settled, like most black families in that era, near Central Avenue. And of course, my father was a barber who had a barber shop on Central Avenue. So for whatever I know of, he was probably in the middle of a whole bunch of stuff. And my mom didn't like it, but anyway.
Were they not from LA?
No. Of course, like most people of their generation, they gravitated from the South.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom was from Louisiana. We did have relatives, that originated out of New Orleans, but my mom's family was in the central part of the state of Louisiana, a little small town called LeCount, which was right outside of Alexandria.
That's where my folks are from, Alexandria.
Okay. So all down there by that hanging tree place. But anyway,
We all have the tree.
Right.
What about your dad?
But my dad was from Texas.
Okay.
And my dad was from a small little place called Omaha, Texas, which was near Fort Worth, in Fort Worth, Dallas area. And, my mom, because my mom's family came to LA looking for a better life and what have you. Just a quick thing about my mom's family, which you'll catch up with later, of course, is that my mom's mother was the librarian in that little town, and the library was right across the street from their house.
Oh.
So when I was a kid, she'd go to work and take me with her, and I'd be in this library running around with all these books and everything, and she'd just let me, look at whatever, or, whatever I wanted. And so I guess to a certain degree, and for the most part, my grandmother's family was really looked upon as one of the more educated families, just from the standpoint that they all got an education. They pretty much, a lot of them did all go to college, and like my mother's oldest brother, he would go around and read the newspaper to all the old folks. And he actually became, at the time, was sort of extraordinary, a captain in the Army in World War II. So that was my mom's family. Then my dad's family, they were on a farm. And of course, they were pretty well respected in their little small town. And of course, my dad ended up leaving because I think he kicked this white guy's ass, and so he had to leave town. So
Those apocryphal tales.
yeah, and so he came west from that experience, and eventually went into the service. So they met in L.A., and as my dad would say, my mom was skipping rope down the street, and he said, "Who's this girl?" He started talking to her. So the funny thing about the two of them, and in terms of this, like I said, my dad, he was a barber, and my mom initially went to school to be a hairdresser. So there's this whole thing in common that they had there, I guess. So, from that point, we lived out there in East LA, on 43rd Place near Central. Actually, right off of Central, right around, not too far from the Dunbar. Actually, turned out I didn't know anything about the Dunbar when I was a kid, but that's where we lived, and we lived there till I was about 9.5, almost 10. And when we moved to what was then called the West Side, the West Side being near La Cienega and Jefferson. And of course that's on the border of LA and Culver City. And so because of that, that particular area I lived, and it was integrated, we were like the third black family on the block that we lived in. It was like moving in with the Nelsons. Right? And so and so there was a lot of things that came from that sort of experience, because it was the 50s, it was the height of integration, the integration that was happening in that part of town in LA, and I had quite a few interesting experiences after living on the other side of town, where it was mostly a black community. I'll just give an example. One of my friends who was happened to be white, we used to walk to school together, and we walked home one day, and I went to his house, and his mom immediately says, "You tell that boy to stay outside." And so when I got home and I told my mom about it, and my mom being the great sociologist that she had to become, she said, "Well, don't worry about it. If he comes over to your house, he can come in." And so from that, a lot of the experiences that I was having were to sort of formulate, I guess you would say, the way I started to see the world. But to get back to this thing, I remember Buzz was asking, like, how did you become an artist? When I was young, and I remember one Sunday, my dad was doodling on some paper on Sunday, after Sunday dinner. And I thought, wow, that looks great. Let me take a shot at it. And so I started drawing from that standpoint. And so that when we moved over to the other side of town in this integrated situation where I'm always already shy, and there I was now in this situation where you got all these eyes on you, and all these other circumstances that come with that situation. Drawing became a good outlet for me, and it was a way for me to get my drawings on the board, and I could do what I thought. Well, hey, I could be recognized without having to put myself out there. And so I pursued drawing in my early art career, as a matter of fact, or painting eventually. And of course, going through school at that time, watching the great phenomena of the pop culture, because I just could not understand what was wrong with all these white girls going crazy over Elvis Presley. I just said, what is this? They would just be beyond themselves, And so, we just tripped out on it, and so that by the time that we got into junior high school, and then eventually high school, these pop phenomena that, as it were, would happen. But then there was these other things that were happening, of course, that you were always trying to. See, I was always had to negotiate, because it was interesting that you were talking about the schools that you went to.
Which one?
I went to because I went to Marvin Avenue School, which is now right next to the 10. Because when I grew up, they were building the 10 freeway. We used to cross it. We used to walk over it to go to school, because when they put it in, they cut us off from just walking straight to school. And so I went to Marvin, then I went to Pasteur. And so, and then Pasteur was really trippy because, the integration thing that was happening was the black families moving in. Most of the community that we lived in and around was Jewish. And so it was black families and maybe a smattering at that time of Latino families and a few Asians. And then when we got to junior high, that equation, it started to change a little because we lived in this optional district somewhat, because when we went to Pasteur, our rival junior high was Mount Vernon. So we used to always hear about Mount Vernon and Fauché. And of course...
Now, was Mount Vernon a black school?
Yes.
Yeah. But Mount Vernon, of course, was, as far as its high school that it was attached to, was LA High. But you see, in today, in today's world, when they talk about gangs, as a guy, we had to be always aware of what was happening with that whole situation. And in my community, I was lucky that the guys who were involved in that kind of activity, they sort of nurtured us. Because, of course, when you talk about Adams, see, Adams was the big boulevard. And when you went on Adams, anything and everything was going to happen. And so this guy used to sort of like get us ready. He says, look, you guys are going to be out here, so you need to know how to defend yourselves. So we got all that kind of defensive, community defense stuff, where basically this guy would train us to beat each other up. so that when somebody else would attack you, you would know how to take a punch, and you know how to come and support each other. Yeah, it was like going to what they call basic training. Yeah, basic training in the military, right?
But now, is this high school or does it start with
This starts in elementary school going up, because by the time you get to junior high, the formulation of gangs is real, and there was the bartenders. And the Crips and the Blood thing came later, but the Crips was there because the Crips used to show up. And as a matter of fact, when I was in high school, we went to a party, which of course, like you were saying, back in those days, you go to a party, man, you dressed.
Totally.
Yeah, you wasn't gonna get no girls if you weren't dressed. So, you have on your suit, you have your Sunday suit, and you be looking really crisp. And then, of course, while you're there doing that, the gangs are circling the party, their cars are bouncing, and, they're looking to, kick some ass. But anyway, and this one particular party we were at, and it was really cool. You know, everybody, this family, the girls had the family room in the backyard and in the garage, and everybody was there dancing, and the lights were low, and then all of a sudden, boom! This dude goes flying across the room. These lights come on. These dudes are standing in their trench coats talking about, "The bartenders are here. We're here to kick some ass." And so it was like, okay, what you gonna do now? Because they blocked all the entrances and the exits. And so the thing is, they got through the front. Somebody wasn't, you know, on it at the door. So I remember it was me and my brother. We figured out how to get out of that garage, got over the fence, and we were hitting it. I mean, you know, I was an athlete when I was a kid anyway, so that was part of just running, right? But there's one crazy friend of mine. I ain't taking this. I'm going back. I said, man, you don't want to do that. And of course, he ended up dead that night.
Oh.
You know, I said, man, who you gonna save? These dudes got guns. Come on. Anyway.
And so this was in the 50s?
No. This was early 60s.
Early 60s.
Yeah. Because I went to high school in 60.
Well, what school did you go to?
Oh, I wasn't checking. So I went from Pastor to Hamilton.
Oh my goodness.
See, so from one integrated school to one even minor, less integrated school. As a matter of fact, when I first went to Hamilton, there was like 25 of us in the whole school, and we knew when one of us was absent. You know, because we all met at the same place to sort of support each other. You know, because it was definitely a cultural kind of adventure doing that at that time. But at the same time, you know, and of course during that whole time, as far as my arts was concerned, I was taking art classes, and I was always trying to recognize that I had some skills. And when I got to Hamilton, see, I didn't understand this whole thing about fine art and commercial art. And so I could and the thing is, like one of you was saying about the training the other kids were going. You know, I'm taking this art class, and these kids are telling me about taking classes at the county, and their parents are taking them to this and taking them to that. And I'm going like, shit, man, I'm walking to school. My parents are taking me nowhere. So like that on the cultural tip. But
in your art class, was it half and half? Was it half athletes and half artists that really wanted to be there?
Not really.
Oh,
Not really.
okay.
No.
I
mean, I was one of the athletes, but I should say yeah, because I ran track. I played football, and I guess because of that, when you were saying that they had sororities and stuff at Dorsey, see, they had that thing in Hamilton, but of course there weren't any black kids in them. And then a friend of mine got in one, and then eventually, eventually me and this other friend of mine, who because we were good athletes, we qualified to get pledged. And so that was really, really crazy, of course, because here I'm being pledged in this club where, you know, all of our, let's say, club brothers, they all live down here in this, you know, in sort of like the Beverly Glen community. You know, Hamilton is on Robinson Boulevard. Yeah, there's all those woods over there. So, so you know, you get taken to these houses, man, and it's like something you've never seen before, right? And then, of course, some of the dudes weren't exactly wanting you in this club, but they were going along with it because socially it was the thing to do, to integrate. And so that's what was happening. We were the integration factor. And
so how does that relate? I'm trying to speak.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going off. You got to do that. Okay.
How does this relate to you get to the next stage?
Okay, what happens?
Where did you go? And
yeah. So what happens is I end up leaving when I graduate from Hamilton. My family sends me to the South. And I go to a whole totally different direction. I'm going to Southern University in Baton Rouge during the height of integration. And I'm majoring in art when I'm down there. And so I have a whole flip, if you will, of the script, and culturally a flip of the script. And for the most part, you know, the brothers down there thought there was something wrong with us because of the way we talked. You know, you don't sound like a black person.
Right.
And
this is mid-60s.
Yeah, this is like 1964. right after the Civil Rights Law was passed, you know, and I had this wonderful experience on the train in Houston where this white guy asked me to pick up his bags, and you know, I'm 17, I'm wild, and I'm saying, man, you must be crazy. I'll never carry your shit again in life. And he has a tantrum in the Houston train station, and I'm not being smart enough to realize I could have got hung for laughing at him in the train station. But you know, that was we had a lot of we got chased out of the state capitol in Baton Rouge because we went on the wrong day. I mean, you know, it's all that wonderful stuff. And but the thing that happened, I'm glad you asked that question, because what happened for me when I was in undergraduate school and I was majoring in art, I was majoring in painting, and I had a couple of experiences, one with an art history teacher, where I felt he wasn't really teaching us. All he was doing was giving us tests without, you know, backup readings. And I stood up, and this is where my whole thing starts off for me. I stood up and said, you know, I don't think that you're like too relevant. So when I said that, all the other students who were wanting to say it jumped up and said it too. And so we all flunked. And so that was the beginning of my revolutionary sort of self in a certain way.
What were you thinking when you said not too relevant? How are you using that term? What did you mean?
You mean in terms of the teacher?
Yeah.
Well, the thing was, he would give you tests on stuff that you hadn't even been told to read.
Oh, okay. So just generally.
Yeah, and then he played that old school don't question me, just do as I say. And I, you know, growing up in a black family, after a while you sort of get tired of that. And I figured this was part of my whole thing anyway, is that I wanted to make my own life. I mean, that was the only thing that got me to actually accept going to the South, because I could get away from some of the parental influences that my mom was throwing on me.
Well, I was wondering about, I mean, this is 64, and this is an art history class.
Right.
What kind of art history? Was this like a survey thing?
Just regular, you know, chancing.
Okay. But I mean, were you looking at that point for some information about art that indeed felt more relevant to your own experience?
Well, of course, the whole civil rights movement was all around you. I mean, who was that came to campus? I don't know, it's just always happens. No, it was the brother who he was with King and split off, and
Abernathy?
No.
Stokely Carter.
Yeah, Stokely
Stokely.
Stokely comes, and when Stokely comes and turns the campus out. The campus turns out because we were pissed off with the black administration for kowtowing to the state government, and you know, just a bunch of little kind of silly things now and today, but you know, were big then. And then of course, then the state police come, and the campus is blocked off. And then not after that, you know, the Klan comes and they burn their crosses. So, you know, it was just that wonderful time in the South. Sleepy time in the South, but it wasn't sleepy.
Were you shocked by all that? Or
Not really.
You know, your time in LA prepared you for this, quote unquote, or were you seeing it on TV?
We were seeing all this stuff on TV. Actually, when I started to go to school down there, I was a little concerned because, you know, there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened in 64 in the South that let you know that you weren't just going to some kind of nice social movement. And but you know, it really sort of, like I said, sort of flipping the script. And I mean, you know, Spike caught it perfectly in school days, man. We go out in the hood and they're like, oh, you college ends, and you know, and all this kind of stuff. And you know, you gotta say, okay, if I don't get my ass kicked out here in the hood getting a hot dog, you know, I'll get an education. And so you had those kind of experiences. But in terms of how it informed, you know, in terms of your art, yeah, you know, we were making work that we were trying to say something in regards to the movement as well. And of course, what I found out, you know, from those experiences coming back to LA after undergraduate school was that wasn't going to get you in graduate school. Because I did try to get into UCLA. And of course, I mean, I wasn't really, and a certain thing that you were saying, Barbara, you know, after going to school in Louisiana, there's some kind of deficit that you get with the way that you got to do. I had to take extra classes to get into a graduate school at some point when I tried to get into Cal State LA before they turned into a university. They had to do what you went to there, you got to take these classes that you didn't get down there. But for the most part, all of those things actually sort of inform you to what you eventually are going to do. And so for the most part, when I couldn't get into UCLA, I just thought, okay, I gotta do it some other way. So that's how I ended up going into the mural movement.
Well, I didn't really get into UCLA in sculpture,
Okay.
which I applied in. I got into the design department laterally.
And I think Ulysses brought up a huge point, although it was kind of a toss-away point about Jansen.
Oh yeah.
That with all of us, I think it was an issue of omission. We did not see ourselves in that book. And that was the main book that everybody used for art history, the Hassinger. And there was nothing there. There was nothing that indicated that we had a legacy at the time. And basically it's only now that that's really happening. And
Did that affect you? Did you say, well,
yes.
this is wrong?
Well,
This is totally
Go ahead.
It affected me because, you know, I've had this French thing going on. I had French in high school, and I took one semester in college, and so I would because I wanted, one of the reasons I wanted to speak French is because I wanted to be able to read art books about African art.
Okay.
And because they were, at that point, they were all in French. Most of them were in French. So I'm looking at these books, and with my broken French, I am seeing the cruelest, I mean, literally tears would come to my eyes when I would read those texts and see how they were talking about Africans. I mean, even now it makes me cry, because it was just the worst thing in the world. And with Picasso, you know, they asked him, well, what do you think about African art? Because, you know, and he says, what art?
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a man that I adored. I mean, that was the only, you know.
Yeah, and he made his whole career
on that.
What he called wasn't art.
Yes,
Right.
And for him, it was a toss-away thing, you know.
Well,
So these were crushing things that I think we all have in common, this sense of omission.
well, that was the whole thing. See, and at Southern, the style of painting that they taught was Impressionism.
Mm-hmm.
The chair, that's what his style, so everybody else adopted it. But there was one brother there from Chicago named John Payne. And he's the one who saved me, really. Because after I went through that experience in our history, I was saying, I'm out of here. Because my little revolutionary thing was saying, I don't care who you are. I mean, you know, I feel like my whole generation is rebelling against this generation. So I'm going to rebel too. And he just told me, look, you know, you can either accept this as a defeat or you can overcome it and figure out what you want to do with it. Because to whatever degree, you can't just displace this. You have to work your way through it. And that was like my first real understanding of what it would take to become an artist and to actually take on the kind of ideas that were coming in my head. And so when I left Southern, and I tried to get into UCLA and that didn't work out, I tried to get into Otis because Charles White was there. And because my style of actually drawing, I attributed to my, you know, really my appreciation of Charlie's work, and I really liked that style. And of course the themes that were in his work. And of course, I tried to get in. I got accepted actually, and then my mom was paranoid about the whole thing of when they check your financial stuff, because I guess she was doing a little thing on the books that might have been not right. I'll leave it at that. And so she wouldn't sign the papers. So I just said, Mom, you're just killing my career. So I left and moved to Hawaii. Now I'm not going to go into the Hawaii life, although it was wonderful. But it did help me sort of figure out more of what I wanted to do, and of course what I saw there in terms of what was happening to the Hawaiian people, and this whole this post-colonial relationship with the U.S. I said, damn, this is the same thing that's happening to black folks. So it just sort of, you know, because I saw the whole Hawaiian culture being pimped. and you know the money that they were making and the whole thing. So when I came back, I was ready to get in, and when I applied the next time, my mom said, "Go right ahead."
How many years had passed?
Let's see, that was.
How many years were you in Hawaii?
I was in Hawaii for about 2.5 years. So, you know, and I was doing drawings and stuff over there, pastel work and stuff, because it's hard to do stuff over there with the humidity and everything. But the thing, of course, before I had gone over there, is that I had lived in Venice, and I had this career as a muralist, post going to graduate school. And so, in that sense, I had a career as a muralist, but then when I came back, and I'd also started shooting video when I was in Venice. As a matter of fact, I was in Venice when the beginning of video was being introduced in Southern California that way, on the boardwalk.
Was Spark established then?
No, see, that was the beginning of Spark when I started painting murals. I was working with Judy Baca at the time.
Maybe we should stop here.
Sure.
And then have some lunch, and we'll come back, and we'll start with you talking about murals and.
Okay, yeah, because I go up to that into grad school and then out. Okay.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Woo, it's hard, and we've had a lot of experience.